I'm out here taking a little walk this morning and saw another apple tree right there. A lot of wild apple trees in northern Maine. But just wanted to tell an interesting little thing here, as I do a lot of research in my life, and found a book in the office here of the place we bought. And it's a book called The Allagash by Lou Dietz. And it gets into the history of northern Maine. And I can understand the guy that built this place. He was a game warden, and I understand why he had this book. It's got a lot of history and things in it about northern Maine, and it brought up a very interesting point. And I've been seeing this more and more as I do research with different things. When there's something evil that has been started, or some evil movement or whatever, I'm seeing that there's oftentimes that there's a merchant involved. And the timber industry here in northern Maine is a very sloppy industry, quite frankly. Now that it's gone to mechanized logging with feller bunchers and all the other stuff that they use. It started out with the logging camps back in the 1700s, and going up through the crosscut saws and axes, which I have a bunch of those in my shop here. And then it went to the chainsaws and the skidders, and then it's now to the mechanized stuff where you don't need as many men, and the whole thing and all the problems that creates with all the heavy equipment and what it does to the land and everything. But a lot of areas they regulate the logging a lot more than they do here. And I'm not for government regulation, don't get me wrong, but the whole point is I've seen some properties that were logged way too hard. But what happens with that? Well, you get the people and they'll say, well, see what the white man has done? The white man has come in and done all this log raping. But who was the white man working for? That's the interesting thing. As I'm reading this book, he's naming names of the big lumber barons that started this whole, lust for logging, the white pine especially. And they're merchants. They're merchants from Massachusetts, Boston, mostly. And they buy up all the land up here. One guy owned 25 townships at one point in time. And he was a merchant. And if you study who the merchants are, according to the King James Bible, the book of Revelation, you will see that those merchants, you compare it to the book of James, the merchants are Jews, specifically mingled Jews. And if you study the names of these people and things, and you actually look into who they are, I mean, just do internet searches, just look up genealogy type of things, and you'll see, yes, they are mingled Jews. Jews that moved to Europe, that were kicked out of the land of Israel back in the first century, and after that, and they move to Europe, and they intermarry with the European people, and then it becomes all about money. And since they have no promise from God anymore of inherited land, they're like Esau. They sell their birthright for pottage, and then they go out, and then it's this thing of, we have to make lots of money. Joseph Seligman was a big one. Paul Schiff or something, I can't think of what it was, but he was one of the guys that created the whole Federal Reserve thing. He was Creature of Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin's book. And they're involved in this thing. So, but again, see how the satanic media and educational system messes people up. And they think to themselves, oh, it's the white man. Look what the white man has done. All these horrible white people, how they've destroyed America, And, white people were involved. I'm not going to say that they weren't. They worked for these lumber barons and everything else. But it's so strange to me because, like I said, I'm not even looking for it. I'm just reading a book learning about northern Maine, and yet it's just the merchants. This guy was a merchant, and he went and he bought a bunch of stuff, and he got involved in speculation and all these other things. What is speculation? Well, it's just basically trying to think of, if I could cut all these trees down back here, and if I could make a market for those trees, I think I could make a couple $1 million, and they get involved in these risky business ventures. That's what the merchants do. And it all ties back into the scriptures. That's the thing you have to understand. And this book I'm reading, this Lou Dietz guy, he's an evolutionist. And, he just kind of pokes fun at the Bible a couple times in religion. Just kind of, they're religious people are a little stupid, And yet he's confirming the Bible by what he's writing. When he writes about actual truth and science and statistics and whatever, he's actually confirming the scriptures. It's kind of funny. Evolutionists do that quite a bit. I've seen that. Guys that are intelligent in some ways. They rejected the Lord, so they're not really intelligent. But, they'll actually confirm the scriptures. And I think if you just open up your mind a little bit more, you'd actually see the truth of the Bible. Instead of looking at the hypocrisy of people that call themselves Christians, why don't you look at the scriptures as they are, as the truth, the ultimate foundation of truth. But it was very distressing reading about all of the flora and fauna, the animals that used to exist in Maine, and they were destroyed because of this greed, this lust for money, and clearing the land off, and all the just insane amounts of logging that were done. And of course the British Crown at one point in time was very greedy for mast pine, I think they called it, the big tall straight trees, the old growth timber here in Maine in the Northwoods, because Maine is I think the largest coniferous forest, has the largest coniferous forest on earth or something. I mean, there's millions of acres up here that are just all, were at one point in time white pine. They were bigger than all the other trees. You can still see it. Drive around the road, you'll see these big white pines going up above. We actually have a huge one out front here on our own land. I'll turn this way a little bit. You can see here behind me a lot of spruce trees here. Wait for the car to go by. This thing here is a tamarack, or kind of an eastern larch, they call that. And there's some hemlock that we have on our property, eastern hemlock, but there's not a whole lot of them. There was a woolly allegid bug that came through years ago down in Pennsylvania as well when I was living there. But the whole thing is the pine forests and things, and the coniferous trees, the softwood trees, are really big here, very big industry. And we have some really big trees back in the woods that way, real big timber back there. But I learned through reading this book that we actually used to have wolverines here in northern Maine, and they were all killed off, along with wolf packs. They were all killed, and eastern mountain lion, I think it's pretty much extinct by now. I had a neighbor, actually the neighbor of my property, and he told me the one time that he saw a mountain lion. But he's a little bit, has a few screws loose. So we just we laugh about it and things. I think he just saw, Canadian lynx or something, and he thought it was a mountain lion, or a bobcat or something, I don't know what but he thought. But I saw a mountain lion over there. Please, make sure you protect your son, and please don't kill the mountain lion. There's not many left. Well, I don't think he saw an actual mountain lion. But we do have bobcat and Canadian lynx around. But at one point in time, there were actual eastern mountain lions here. And caribou, we were just in the town of Caribou 2 days ago, I think it was. Went up to a place called the Acadian Village, and it's the French people, and they were a small group of them, and they were dating back into the 1600s that they settled in northern Maine, and the British persecuted them pretty heavily. And I was asking the girl, she's actually a tour guide, she's a descendant of the Acadians, and she was telling me about how that they were Catholics and everything else, and she's a Catholic still and whatever. And I asked her a bunch of questions, and there was a bunch of other people there, so I couldn't really get into a real good witnessing type of thing. But just wanted to make her think a little bit. I said, you know, did they have Vatican support, you know, or was it just kind of a splinter group? And she said, well, that's actually a really good question. She said, well, yeah, they were kind of more of a splinter group. And I said, that's why the Vatican wouldn't protect them. And, you know, we got into a pretty good conversation and things. And my wife got to talk to her a little bit about some stuff. But, you know, the whole point is, Maine has a very long history. I remember my older brother, he moved to Montana, northwestern Montana, Montana specifically, many years ago. And he said, you know, he'd go to a museum out there and they'd be, look, here is some old artifacts from the 1920s when people first started coming up here and settling. And he was just laughing about it, saying, you know, we're from the East Coast. We have stuff dating back into the 1700s, you know, and you come up here to the you know, northern part of New England, and we have stuff going back to the 1600s back here. But anyhow, getting back to what I was saying, the thing of Caribou, it's kind of funny, you know, it's kind of a sick joke, inside joke. Oh, this is Caribou, Maine. Why'd you name it Caribou? Well, because there used to be huge herds of caribou here in northern Maine, and they killed all of them off. I actually read the story in this book I'm reading about the last caribou, and this guy was over in the Allagash wilderness area, and he saw this last caribou, and he paddled across the lake to get to it. I think it was Chamberlain Lake or something, but anyhow, he paddles across, walks up, and this caribou's just kind of walking away from him, and it stops and turns around and just looks at the guy, and the guy killed it. It's the last one. What are you doing? But, you know, hey man, I got the last caribou. You know, the reckless attitude of you know, we're doing this thing for the money and whatever. Just sickening. But see, it ties in with the scriptures. Again, if you're an atheist, you need to understand, it isn't some kind of a thing of I'm in a church building somewhere and I surround myself with like-minded people and I only listen to other Christians. I don't listen to anybody else. I'm reading a book from a secular author, a evolutionary atheist, and he's confirming the Bible, confirming the scriptures. Because he's telling stories about the merchants and how the merchants came in. The merchants were the ones that destroyed a lot of things here in Maine because of this greed, this lust for money. You know, and there was a whole thing about over in the Allagash. We have, I think it's the Allagash River actually that goes up through, or Aroostook. I forget which one it is, but one of them flows from the south north. It actually is a north flowing river. Well, they wanted to get the timber out, so they were trying to find ways that they could flood things and raise levels of different lakes to reverse the course of the river to make it go south, so they could float the logs down river. That's how they used to move logs around back in the 1800s. Trying to get this deer fly. And again, and you know, and there he said about, oh, there were, you know, Christians and things that were very much against this stuff. And if you don't understand, when you live in the city, one of the big struggles for people that live out in the country, like where I live here, one of the big struggles is that a lot of the merchants from the cities want to try to come out here to make money, to exploit the wilderness areas to make money. And then white people get blamed for it. It's just disgusting. So, but you know, like I was saying, I hope you understand out there that a lot of the things that I study that confirm the scriptures to me, they're not even written by Christians. And if you're truly looking for absolute truth, you will find it in the most unlikely places. You know, when Paul writing to Timothy, he says, till I come give attendance to reading. That's not just the scriptures. And you will find this, you know, I mean, I'm looking at my old train car here that's back behind my barn. I'll show you here. I'll be doing a tour of the inside of it when we hit 100,000 subscribers. The video's already done. I'll just be releasing it. But the Bangor and Aroostook Railroad, serving northern Maine, it says up there, right there. And these cars went the whole way up to the northern part of Maine. I think Fort Kent, Madawaska area up in there. And, you know, I was just reading about this morning, and they literally said a logger up in the northern part of Maine could get to Bangor in like 5 hours or something by taking the railroad. And why do they have this big, huge railroad system? Why? For the money. And it's being financed by a lot of the wealthy merchants. So, again, like I said, you look for truth, you'll find it. And sometimes in the most unlikely places. But that'll be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. See you in upcoming videos.